Good morning, everyone. My name is John Jarvis. I am a certified HashiCorp implementation professional in HashiCorp Vault and Terraform. I work for Somerford Associates. Somerford are a hyper-specialized partner of HashiCorp, and we have clients across all sectors of UK industry and government with a specialized suite of products that are really focused around security and observability. So I'd like to keep this informal. If you have questions, if something isn't clear, please just hold me up. I tend to get going, but we'll listen out and I'll look at the chat as well. Fire those questions in, and we'll take them as they come. And if I can't answer them now, I'll be happy to talk to you offline or out of band, shall we say? Okay, so. We're here today to talk about zero trust security in particular. But before we get on to that, just for those who aren't familiar with HashiCorp and what the fans of it tend to call the Hashi stack, it's an expanding list, well, as of a few years ago, that you see on the right there. It's really around the cloud operating model is the main takeaway we want to have with this suite of products, and particularly around automation and secure automation in the context of today of your cloud and on-prem infrastructure, marrying the two. So of the products you see on the right, the ones we're going to focus on today are kind of in the middle there. Vault, absolutely, which you may be familiar with. Terraform's obviously the most popular one, but you may have heard of Vault. And then a new one, fairly new, as of last year, Boundary, that's continuing to they're continuing to work on. We'll get into that in a bit, and Console as well has a role to play in zero trust security. You see some of the numbers there for HashiCorp, and they've recently gone public as well. Okay, so some of the companies, sorry, that HashiCorp works with, and quite a few of them, as you probably noticed, Fortune 500 companies. There's open source versions of all the products that you just saw on the previous slide, but the core of the Hashi stack, which is 4 products, Terraform, Vault, Console, and Nomad, have their own enterprise paid for versions that are really geared towards multi-data center, medium to large organizations. And you see there quite a few enterprise customers. Okay, so set the stage a bit. For those who haven't heard of zero trust security and what it means, we'll get into that, but I think probably all of you are aware of the environment that we're working in right now. We are living in the time of sophisticated computer network attack or cyber attacks, as it's known. And you can't help but escape. You can't escape. Can't help but notice. Sorry, the things in the news like SolarWinds and whatnot. So it's certainly on everyone's mind, and specifically, it's on a lot of chief executive officers' minds as well, as you see there. And the point to highlight here is that, excuse me, many of them have chosen Vault, HashiCorp's Vault. And we'll get into why that is. Okay, so maybe you're not quite as old as me, but I certainly remember these days of everybody owning a data center, and very much what we called in the day castle and moat. And it was about that perimeter completely. Once traffic was inside, well, it was considered trusted. And so there's advantages and benefits to that model in the time that we were working in, but I think most of us now, particularly if we want to get into, you know, having that agility, to having that efficiency that cloud brings, all those benefits. It's just not a model that works. With the the perimeter is perforated on a regular basis, shall we say? So yeah, in that environment, what's the recourse? How do we work in that? Well, what you end up having in many cases, and I don't know what the cases are with you, but please feel free to speak up, is companies who have worked in that time and now are in the modern data center age on the left there, or on the right there, sorry. They end up having, a number of systems probably, that legacy systems of record, that are still on infrastructure they own, be it a payroll system, an HR system, something like that. And then all of these customer facing, let's say, platforms and whatnot that, that are delivering their products, their services, that sort of thing. And doing so, at pace and whatnot across possibly multiple clouds, cloud platforms. And that's tricky, right? Because the two have to interact, and how's that possible? And this is over time, and you're talking about migrations and whatnot, and you can't just flick the switch, as it were. And this is where the HashiStack really excels, because you can, a lot of what we're talking about here, and zero trust security is no different, is platform agnostic, really. Cloud agnostic is a term that you'll hear a lot with the HashiStack. And the idea is that these tools don't really care in a lot of cases, whether it's on legacy on-prem or a cloud of some sort, or multiple different ones. You can coordinate and work with that. So that's kind of where we were, where we are, and how that might work together. But of course, it's not just about getting things working. How do you do it securely? So yeah, sorry. It's, again, just to highlight a lot of what I'm sure you're aware of, SIEM software and that sort of thing as well. I didn't mention that, but an IP based as well, right? So very much keeping track of a lot of things that are potentially quite changeable. It's another aspect that we want to keep in mind. So when we're talking about, the security in the modern data center, we want to get away from that. It needs to be dynamic. The networking that it sits on needs to be dynamic as well. And we'll touch on that a little bit as well. That's where console comes in. But yes, it's about these processes are automated. The security also needs to be automated. And the way that we're going to look at that is around identity-based security versus what various things are, assigned to you at any moment in time, such as an IP address, for example. Okay, so around that identity piece, identity-driven controls, as you see there, we're going to kind of break it down into four areas. And again, if you look at the cloud operating model, this is the way that HashiCorp. This is all covered in the cloud operating model, I guess is my point here. And it's worth revisiting, because it's kind of keeps things in perspective, particularly when we're talking about a lot of products. Okay, so first up, we have HashiCorp Vault. When we're talking about automation, we're talking about machines doing things, right? So this isn't humans at the keyboard, logging into their systems or whatnot. This is services, this is interacting, proving who they are, and then receiving a set of permissions, and authorizations based on that in real time. And this is where HashiCorp Vault shines. It's very much about all of these processes, doing them at speed. And when we're talking about the secrets involved, just a quick thing there, we're not just talking about passwords, which is often what people go to first and foremost. You know, there could be tokens or certificates. There's a PKI, secrets engine for Vault. So yeah, just keep secrets as a generic concept in your mind while we're going through all of this. So yeah, HashiCorp Vault came out of Terraform development. Interestingly, they needed a way to HashiCorp themselves needed a way to manage the secrets that were associated with all the infrastructure they were building with Terraform, and it's turned out to be an incredibly handy product and has since been offered to all of you folks. Okay, so I talked about the secrets engine there, but more generally, how does Vault work? Well, you see kind of the three elements there. So you have those secrets engines that I talked about, but prior to that, what the key to Vault is that it's all based around the relationship, this strong association with your identity provider of choice. So Vault is not in the business of confirming who you know, any particular process or human is in that moment. It's using an identity provider that of your choice. And again, all the Hashi stack products very much plug and play. So you see down in the bottom left there that really is quite open. It can be an LDAP. It can be you know, your Azure Active Directory or Active Directory. It can also be your cloud platform. You know, Okta. We're going to be talking about single sign-on shortly. Whatever it is, that's Vault is going to work with your identity provider to determine that you are who you say you are as a human, or as the process is actually what it says it is. Then at that point, Vault is going to say, okay, based on that identity, I have a set of policies, and those policies specify permissions on a variety of secrets engines and backends. And at that point, the client can request those and move on. Basically, the idea is that Vault issues a token, and that's the end of the transaction, and the process in this case can do what it needs to do. And a key of this, key aspect of this as well, is those tokens can be quite short-lived. So when we're talking about, you know, blast radius and things like that, you can set things to be much more ephemeral than we're used to dealing with, let's say, in terms of, you know, physical tokens and things like that. You know, there's no need to have something that's valid for 30 days. There's no need to have something that is valid for 30 hours, really, when you think about most automated processes. So you will see scenarios where, for example, there's an SSH key secrets backend. You can set that validity to seconds if you so choose, because it's only used for that initial connection. And you know, if the connection drops or whatever, Vault is designed to be able to, you know, another request goes through and you get another key. But in most scenarios, you just have the key to get that connection. You have that connection for the entire bit of work that you're doing, you being a process or a human, really, in that particular scenario. So yeah, it can change. It can change the way you think about secrets management, and just use cases in general quite significantly. And then, of course, that that has a huge impact. You follow that on in your risk management and whatnot, and think about, well, what happens if someone leaves this laptop on the tube or whatever. It's a different scenario basically, and that's kind of where we want to be with when we're talking about zero trust security, right? We don't want to have to trust that laptop for any length of time, really. As one example. I mean, there's loads, but I hope that's clear. Okay, let's see. So yeah, some stats on Vault there. Note the banks on the right. That's pretty significant. Okay, so yeah, just to kind of summarize some of the features of Vault, because I focused in on some specific scenarios there. So I talked about the secrets management. There's also what's called a transit secret engine, and it can be used to encrypt data. It can be quite handy, particularly in scenarios where you're dealing with customized software and whatnot, and you don't want to burden your devs with having to correctly implement various encryption algorithms. You can offload that to Vault in a way that's quite elegant. So if anyone's interested in more details on that, we can certainly talk about it. All this stuff is designed to excuse me, fit with the current commercial demands and requirements of say a credit card company or something like that. So when you're looking at data protection, there's all kinds of things around securely dealing with credit card numbers and allowing for masking of various things in certain use cases. It's very much well, HashiCorp in general are very responsive and in constant discussions with their user base. That's a big part of their philosophy with having so many open source products. And yeah, they've certainly, as Vault has use and functionality has expanded, it's been very focused in that area. So yeah, if you'd like to know a little bit more about what we mean by advanced data protection and the details around there, please do let me know. Okay, so we talked a bit about identity, but one of the things that is useful to highlight, I think, is once Vault has that identity. So again, we've talked to that identity provider. We've determined that the session is valid in terms of who they say they are. You can still easily think of scenarios where there's an identity sprawl. That's what it's often called, where you have your identity on this system, that system, another system, and some of the examples there are all of your different cloud platforms. If you're a multi-cloud organization, GitHub is there as well. You see, and one of the great things about Vault is it can collapse that down. In Vault itself, when I talked about the policies that were associated with an identity, it's it's not that they're associated with each of those Vault aliases them, so that there's a single entity is the term in Vault, and it can be all of those different identities that you have out in the world in your organization can all just be aliases of one entity, and that's really powerful in terms of general maintenance, well, security in general, but general maintenance of that. You think about the policies and whatnot associated with, suddenly it becomes much easier. You've got one set of policies for all of those identities, and that can be really powerful in many scenarios where you've got a lot of different services. So that's certainly one of the guiding principles of Vault. Just to highlight, oh, actually, I just noticed that it's available on more than AWS now, I believe. But yeah, just to note that it's non-trivial running Vault. You certainly need an operations team. And there are obviously rewards with that, but just to put all the options out there, as of last year, HashiCorp has their own SaaS, software as a service offering for Vault, where they'll manage all the telemetry. They'll monitor all the telemetry and manage all of the aspects of Vault to ensure that it's running and servicing requests in a manner that you require. I mean, we're talking about millisecond response times are possible if needed, and that's all about the architecture. All that you can put on HashiCorp, and then just worry about managing your secrets, managing the auth methods, how people are authenticating to Vault, that kind of thing. So it's much quicker. What am I looking for? Not onboarding, but gets you up and running much quicker. So again, one multi-cloud workflow, didn't mention that, but yeah, very much push button deployment. Okay, so let's bring it back to zero trust, and we're talking about these four elements, these four bits of the puzzle. So we've identified and authorized machine-to-machine process, that piece, but how do we actually facilitate the access? Well, that's where another HashiCorp product comes in, Console. And this is really about automating services. So, in an environment where things may be torn down and brought up in rapid fashion, where aspects of a service, like we don't necessarily think of it as one database server. We think about a database service that's got some redundancy in there and whatnot. How do we manage that in a way that isn't tied to those things that don't really, that can't keep pace in this automated world we're talking about, and where we want to not have to trust, say, oh, the database, this IP is the database server because of some external piece of information. We don't want to be in a place where we're doing that, because that's not zero trust. So Console is there to facilitate that access, where this process is authorized according to Vault to access a database service. Database services, all Console needs to hear in order to facilitate the actual access that's needed. So Console is a bit of a tricky one to get your head around, to be honest, because it is really multifunctional. I've talked a bit about the service discovery, and there's also an aspect in this service registry of health monitoring. So, here's where services like the database service, the web service are, and here's how they're doing, that sort of thing. Another big part of, I've talked before about how HashiCorp is very much focused on abstracting away the platform, and even across data centers. And this is where the service mesh, Console service mesh, comes in, really working across that to ensure that the services that are running on those, wherever they're running, are available and accessible, just like that. And of course, when we're talking about the services, it doesn't do any good to have those services, automated and working at speed if the underlying infrastructure and this is where a lot of the security sits, obviously, and a lot of the time and delays and ticketing, and you think about all the things that a typical network team did when when I was first starting my career. All that stuff needs to happen at pace as well, and this is where the network infrastructure automation comes in as well, so that your so the underpinning of these services is itself dynamic, and Consul is a big part of that. There's also a tool called Consul Terraform Sync that can help with that, and I'm happy to talk about that as well if you're interested. So again, the service mesh, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about securing those service to service connections. That web process, making sure that it can talk to the database service, whatever that may be in the moment in terms of its redundancy and whatnot. And you see here in the diagram, Consul does that typically through what's called a sidecar proxy, and Envoy is a very popular means of doing that. And again, around the network infrastructure automation as well, you're talking about dynamic updates to the to the network infrastructure to support those services. So yeah, again, just to summarize there, we're decoupling these network operations from the IP space that we used to work in. And services are now a logical kind of construct that can be dynamically updated. And we'll get to this as well in a moment with the third. This aspect of dynamically updating registries, basically, that mean that you can securely connect to things that are going up and down in the less abstract world, if you want. That's a theme of zero trust, because it facilitates the automation, it facilitates the speed of it all. Yeah, and service discovery, and again, the telemetry, which can be exported to ensure that everything is running as it should, and you can respond in or well, realistically, there's automated responses that can happen as needed. Again, much of this is happening too fast for human interaction, or should be. Yeah, so I think I've covered a lot of this guiding principle up to this point. I hope that's clear. And it's very much about working within the applications that you're delivering, and possibly as part of a continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline, or multiple pipelines. And much like Vault, again, even more so, in fact, Consul is non-trivial to run, and HashiCorp is happy to do that on your behalf as a SaaS offering that can be tailored to your needs. And again, I'm not positive, but if anybody is interested, I'm certain there's betas on at least the other platforms, and I apologize for not checking that before speaking with you today. Okay, so we've kind of covered off the automation, the machine side of identity. So authenticating, authorizing, and then actually facilitating that access. Let's talk about the human at the keyboard for a little bit. So the human at the keyboard, who are they who they say they are? How do we do that? Authentication, and then authorizing their access beyond that. How do we do that piece in a zero trust environment? Well, before we get onto that, initially, it was around these kind of well, the same technologies that we've been talking about before that integrate with Vault, an Active Directory and LDAP, that kind of thing, and increasingly, obviously, around a lot of single sign-on services, and that's very much still the case now, and that's why Vault is working with those, all of the popular ones. Okay, so that's the human is who they say they are. There's been multi-factor authentication, whatever the case may be with your single sign-on solution. And again, that's very much plug and play. But what happens beyond that? How does the human actually interact with all of the various services that they need to, all the various applications that they need to? Well, this is a newer piece, let's say. This is a newer area of focus for HashiCorp and this newer product, which is just in open source at the moment. I say just in open source. This is very functional, and you can get all of the benefits of it for free. I say free. Of course, there's there's other costs involved in running all of this stuff, obviously. But yeah, a very, very functional product. Now, again, this was introduced quite some time ago, and there's been a lot of work on it. In fact, if I'll say right now, because I may forget, we've got HashiCorp coming up again, but oh my goodness, there was a great, or well, more than one, but certainly one in particular, excellent talk from the Boundary team on where they're at, and I really enjoyed the use case in particular, where they talked about it from a desk analyst's point of view and getting access to database, and then a problem arises, and then other folks in the organization getting DBA access, database administrator access, and all in the context of Boundary and Vault working together, and very much in that dynamic, have the access as long as you need it sort of way. So yeah, sorry, aside there, but yes, certainly check that out and sign up for HashiConf next week, I think, if you haven't already. Virtual, of course. Yeah, but okay, so that's before we get on to Boundary, what did this access look like, or what does this access look like now in the typical organization? Well, the first thing is, normally you hit a VPN, right? A virtual private network. And that's non-trivial to onboard and offboard as well, which is equally important when we're talking about zero trust, or the goal of zero trust, because that's not really possible in the same way in this scenario. And the reason is there's a huge amount of trust in that credential, in that authentication and authorization. The authorization is, typically network-wide permissions, and that can be a disaster, obviously, if things go awry. And again, it's the security measures, the mitigations in place are often well, quite brittle. I like that terminology. But again, this idea that, okay, we can interact with this particular session because, oh, it's coming from an IP that we trust, and that's of course a big red flag in the world of zero trust. And finally, of course, because all of that's been been somewhat onerous. I don't want to overstate it. It's been somewhat onerous. There's going to be a lifetime to that, that particular access, and not just that access, but like to facilitate that access day on day, particularly in a large organization. And what does that mean? Well, let's bring that laptop back into the picture. If those credentials are sitting on the laptop, and and valid, that's a big risk, right? It's it's um it's a huge concern for the organization. Okay, so how does Boundary help with this? Well, as I hinted at earlier, um, it's the dynamic nature. It's very much in the same vein as Vault in terms of leveraging that, but not they aren't completely tied together. I want to emphasize that. Um, but how does that look at each of these stages? Let's see what that means. So, in terms of getting up and running, it's much simpler, and we can go into detail on that if you'd like. But it's a simpler process because you're already tied into an identity provider of choice, and that's how it's facilitated. Um, configuration is because it's not based around these changing aspects like an IP address. Um, it's it's much more stable, um, and if underpinned by Vault, you've got that um, identity brokering. We talked about the aliasing that can mean that those policies are quite stable or easy to change if needed. Um, the the services themselves, this is a really neat part of Boundary as well, and it's I talked about it earlier with Console, and it is very much in the same vein of when you're talking about connecting to services, the human connecting to services, it is broad categories. So when I mentioned that database example, um, it was a Postgres database in their particular use case in that talk, and it's not that you're contacting a specific server. You have access to a category of servers, and as things come up and go down, um, that's that access is still allowed, I guess is the point. So it but it does all of this without exposing any of that to the outside world, so it remains private. And in some scenarios with Vault, I won't say all of them, but in some scenarios with Vault, um, the interaction is such that the credentials themselves never have to land on the endpoint. Now, in that talk that you might go and see, they actually issue the credentials, and they're then used in the native tools that both the analysts and the DBA use, pgadmin in the latter case, for example. But still, in that case, so credentials are exposed, but those credentials are now, we're talking about valid for a number of minutes versus the the months in many cases that we're talking about with VPN credentials. But excuse me, in many cases, um, what we see is with the interaction in Boundary and Vault, those credentials never have to actually hit the endpoint at all. They're, that piece of the access is facilitated by Vault directly. Again, we can get into that, but that's a really neat aspect. Certainly, a cool use case from my point of view. But yeah, there's a variety of different ways that Boundary and Vault together can help with this. So yeah, we've got many similar themes here in terms of being tied into your identity provider of choice in a plug and play fashion, and then that authorization. So what is the particular user allowed to access, and again Boundary keeps track of all of that. Yeah, I haven't really gone into it, but I think it will in a moment. But there is desktop clients, boundary clients for all the major operating systems. Just pardon me for 1 second. So yeah, the idea is, and then through Vault, to access applications and critical systems, and it's that fine-grained authorizations that we're talking about. You're not managing credentials. You're not exposing the network in certain ways. And you can see some of the examples of the services there. I mentioned Postgres, for example, on the left. So that's kind of the life cycle with human. Okay, so just to kind of bring it all together, it is very much about, I don't have access. This particular endpoint that I have, I can't. I have no access to my corporate system. I have access to the systems that I need in the moment, including say the ticketing system. And then, something's come in. I need database access now as a human. Again, we're in the human world right now, versus the automated processes. So, excuse me. So, I'm a database admin. I need access now, and it is about going into Boundary and getting it, to get onto dynamic, not to a specific server, and not for ages. Very much in a PAM sense. Of where there was typically another human who was saying, okay, DBA, you have creds to this particular server for 30 minutes. Come back and talk to me, a human, if you need longer to fix the problem or whatever. Well, now we're talking about you're the DBA, and therefore you have access to all of these servers, some of which may be healthy, some may be down, whatever the case may be. But you're going to get access to the database as exists now in this resilient environment. You're going to be able to do your work. We're going to give you a default time, and again, your risk assessment and whatnot, and your risk management processes are going to dictate a lot of this. You definitely want to have those people involved in this, in setting up a zero trust environment, this secure environment, obviously. All that's going to happen, and it's going to be have that ephemeral nature as well. And the other thing, this is where the desktop comes in. It's very much about being easy to use. You don't want all of a part of the difficulty with a lot of the VPN stuff is that it is a variety of people in your organization. All of them are going to need to use this facility. So it's a lot of the complications in onboarding in that is to try and minimize the ways that they can make mistakes and whatnot. And Boundary is very much in that same vein in terms of, we don't want the database admin or the database or the marketing analyst or whatever the case may be to be bogged down, to be confused or anything like that. And so Boundary, these desktop applications are very easy to use. And they're open source. So all the benefits of open source, right? You get access to all the functionality. You get access to very responsive developers in this case. That's another thing I should say about Boundary actually, is there's it was last fall, I think, they announced there's a special program, in fact, and if you can sign up to, and you can get access to even some beta features of Boundary, and to test them out in a manner, a very responsive manner, back and forth, like, how did this that for you? What can we do better? How did this fare under these, more strenuous, more rigorous scenarios, more demanding scenarios? I think that sort of thing. So yeah, if any of this is really quite interesting to you, I do recommend going to the HashiCorp website and kind of reading about it, but also getting in touch with them, because This is very much a product that's in development, and while all open source projects you would hope have that responsive, quite personal connection you would hope to the devs. This one in particular, just because it is being worked on so heavily. There's a new partnership with Microsoft, for example, in this space as well. There's loads of stuff. And we'll hear lots of updates, I'm sure, next week, if it is next week, this month at HashiConf. So yeah, just bringing it back now to this overall model that we have. And again, if you want to review any of this stuff, this is exactly how the cloud operating model lays out the security, the aspects of securing this sort of environment. So do download that and have a look if you haven't. But yeah, today we've covered off both the authentication, you are who you say you are, the authorization, giving you permission, or the process permission to do such and such, and then facilitating that access as well. How does that actually happen? So we've done that on both the human side and on the, as they say here, machine side. So I hope that was useful. If there's no questions, it's really just me to thank you for your time and attention. Again, Somerford's a hyper specialized partner. If you're in the UK and you have questions about this, please do get in touch with us. Absolutely, you can use that contact information there for HashiCorp. But if you'd like to speak to one of the trained consultants here and to talk to us about how you might use this stuff, we very much want to be in a space where as the trusted advisor. So there's really no obligation. I just want to highlight in contacting us, we're more than happy to provide advice and to talk generally about what we've seen and what we recommend. And yeah, come to our website to see that, which is somerfordassociates.com, or write us directly at info@somerfordassociates.com. Again, I'm JJ John Jarvis, and I do thank you for your time and attention. And yes, I guess I'll give you a few minutes back in your day. Thank you.